Woj just tweeted, the NBA is planning a Thursday vote of the Board of Governors with an expectation that owners will approve Adam Silver's recommendation on a format to restart the season in Orlando. That is what sources tell ESPN. Again, that is just in from our Woj. Let's say hello now to the Jump's Rachel Nichols and NBA insider Brian Windhorst. Rachel, let's begin with you, and then Brian, please follow up. I mean, the simplest and safest route would be to just resume the season with that traditional 16-team playoff. We just saw the things being considered, and then we just saw Woj's tweet that something's about to happen here. But why are they still exploring other options if that's the safest, easiest way to do it?
Yeah, I mean, it's safer if you have less people, right? So 16 teams is the least amount of people. But the short answer is that you have 14 other stakeholders, 14 other owners who have their own interests. And there is also, of course, the money factor. Fewer games, that means less money for a league that has already lost a lot of it. But the other factor, too, is that first-round playoff games, Sage, I don't want to let go of a secret here, but they're often not that good, right? There's a lot of blowouts. And after all this time, does the NBA really want to come back to 2 weeks of lopsided scores and games that some of the country really isn't interested in? If they can instead start with some suspense, some play-in games, or even regular season games where teams are jockeying for position, that is going to get people invested for what is to come over the next 6 to 8 weeks as they try to make up as much ground as they can.
Yeah, I can understand why fans are like, what's taking so long? Why are they debating all of this for what seems like weeks on end? And it's because it's more complicated than it looks on the outside. It's important to understand that NBA players do not get paid for playoff games. So if they fast forward right to the playoffs and cancel the 259 games left on the regular season schedule, that's a whole bunch of game checks that go away. And then the NBA players are going to say, so wait a minute, then you may want to add some play-in tournament where you're adding games to us. And I don't think there's going to be an issue here. I think that gets worked out. But it's something that you have to go through that step. You have to negotiate with them. And I also want to point out that this is a factor for local television deals. Some of these teams have 8 figures at stake with their local television deals, and getting more of those satisfied is a factor. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through and people to satisfy. And today at that Board of Governors meeting was a lot of talking about the financial implications of these options.
Absolutely. So speaking of that meeting, I mean, he's got to take Adam Silver to take what happened today, what was discussed today, and then think through the weekend and come up with this concrete plan to restart the season. Apparently, the vote will take place, as Woj said, in 6 days on Thursday. Of all the issues out there, Rachel, what's his biggest challenge?
Well, look, there's so many challenges, right? Because as Woj tweeted, the owners do believe in Adam. We had Mark Cuban on the show earlier today. He said Adam's job is to herd 30 cats, which is what he said the owners' meetings are like. But the owners do want to follow Adam. They trust him. They trust his recommendations. And after all this time that Brian's referring to, where some fans are like, just get with it already, it is an important part of the process because all of those owners have to feel like they have been heard, right? So that when Adam does make a decision and asks for a vote next Thursday, they can feel like they at least got their fair shot. But the challenge, Sage, the complication is every decision brings a decision tree of 6 other factors. One thing we were talking about also with Mark Cuban today is, fine, you decide that you want 22 teams instead of the 16 teams. That leads to a second decision then of how much personnel can a team bring? Because if you're having 22 instead of 16 and you only want a certain number of total people on this campus, then that becomes a conversation and negotiation about how many teams, how much personnel they can bring in. It becomes a negotiation with players over how much family they might be able to have at a certain point of time. And that's just one factor. There's so many other branches of the tree. It is a lot to get to in less than a week.
There's a whole other factor here that's got to be negotiated with the players and with the owners, which is how you do return to play. Do you spend 3 weeks in training camp? Does that training camp take place in Orlando so the teams don't have to double quarantine? Do you need to have a couple of scrimmages between other teams? Would you call those exhibition games? There's a whole factor in just the safety of the players health-wise, even beyond the virus. The idea to get these players back healthy to play. So many things to negotiate through, and that's why it's taking so much time. They really want to get it as right as they can, Sage, and that's what we're all waiting for.
And Brian, you know that they've got to negotiate testing too. Are the players going to consent to get tested every day? Is it going to be that somewhat painful nasal swab? Players have pushed back and say they want some sort of blood or finger prick test. There are just hundreds of decisions to be made, and the clock is ticking.
Guys, let me add this to it. This just into SportsCenter. It is a tweet from Woj again. He says owners are largely planning to pledge support for Silver's final recommendation on a plan. So again, expecting that they will support whatever he says. But right now, Woj says which teams expect to include invitations for 20 to 22 teams to resume this season. Sources tell Ramona and also Zach Lowe, as well as Woj. So 20 to 22 teams to resume the season, not the traditional 16 and not 24. Brian, I start with you. Your reaction to Woj's tweet.
Yeah, so the structure that they're looking at is potentially guaranteeing each team that comes in 8 games. 8 games in some sort of pool play or some sort of regular season games followed up with some sort of play-in tourney. And that 8-game number is an important number. Even if it's slightly less than that, even if it ends up being 6 games, those are games that can be used to get players back into condition, to get players back into a rhythm. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. The local television deals. There are certain teams out there that have played less than 60 games on their local TV markets, and that means returning sometimes more than $10 million. So that would accomplish all of those goals, which is why that's what they've been looking at.
And they're talking, Sage, about 20 or 22 teams because that allows them to make a cutoff of teams that were legitimately still in the playoff race. If you look at where we were in this season, how many games some of those teams were out, they can make a judgment and say, okay, anyone who is not 5 or 6 games out, as ESPN has been reporting, they weren't going to make it anyway. So that is why they are hovering around that number. We will have to see if it leans more toward 20 or 22.
As we found out this week when Gary Bettman joined SportsCenter, he said his reaction that he received from everybody after saying straight to the playoffs was, not everybody's going to be happy. And that's the thing. Adam Silver is not going to be able to make every single person happy.
Thanks for watching ESPN on YouTube. For more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for live streaming sports and premium content, subscribe to ESPN+.